Oh, we're live. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm sorry it's taken a bit longer to start this meeting than originally planned. We were having one or two technical issues. I just want to say a very good afternoon to each and every one of you for joining us to this Route to Zero Climate Assembly. It's the first time we're meeting as a Climate Assembly, and I'll go into some aspects about the work that we've been doing around the task force and how it's evolved into the Climate Assembly today. But before I do that, I just want to inform colleagues that this meeting will be recorded for broadcast via the Council's website, and a link will be circulated. The chat function won't be visible on the recording, so recording will go up on the council's website, that people who haven't been able to join us today, so they can watch back the proceedings of today's meeting. The Q&A function will be available, so questions can be asked there. If they cannot be answered in the allotted time, we will answer them after the meeting. So if anyone's got any questions, any comments, please do tap them into the live event Q&A section, and we will try to take them as best possible. We are still very much in the pandemic and meeting under the circumstances which disable us from meeting in large public gathering as we may have today. So this Climate Assembly is the first time we're meeting as a Teams live event. I'm sure there'll be some learning coming out of today's meeting. So if there are any questions or comments or any feedback you want to give us, do drop us a line, send me an email, or send Ellie an email. We'll be more than happy to look at it. We will try and ensure that we take on board some of the learning for future meetings. Many of you will know that a couple of years ago now, we declared a climate emergency as a city and set that very bold target of being carbon neutral by 2030. At the same time that the council declared that emergency, we also committed to set up a Route to Zero climate change task force, which has been meeting up until earlier this year, and pulled together a Route to Zero action plan, which was adopted by full council at Birmingham City Council, the full council being all elected members on the council who meet once a month. Yesterday we had a meeting too. As part of the review of the wider governance arrangements for the Route to Zero programme, it was agreed that the task force should evolve into a climate assembly, and today is the first time that the climate assembly is meeting. The task force, when it met, had a select group of people who were invited from a wide range of organisations, from business to faith to community and education to, we had universities and many other groups on board. But we wanted to open up today's session to the wider public, because we know there is so much social asset there who want to help the council and the city in its very bold and brave target of being carbon neutral by 2030, and come together to tackle climate change in a variety of ways. So the Climate Assembly will provide a forum for the City Council and all other organisations to update the wider community and the work that's being undertaken. So we've got a number of reports today that we would like to share with you. And as I said earlier, the membership is open to everybody. We'll meet 3 times a year, in February, June and October each year. So the next time we're meeting after today will be in October. As I said, good progress has been made since the declaration of the climate emergency in June 2019. And we have a programme, a Route to Zero programme, where I'm now going to hand over to Maria, who will update us on the work that's taken place thus far, and then we can also take some questions from those that are here. So I'm going to hand over to you, Maria, now to take us through the presentation, please.
Thank you, Councillor Zafar. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I've just got a brief presentation which outlines some of the background. Apologies to those of you who are aware of the story so far. But we have some new members in the room today, so we're just going to recap on some of the background and bring you up to date with where we are. So, Birmingham City Council declared a climate emergency on the 11th of June 2019, and climate change was added to the council plan as a 6th priority. In the form of words, Birmingham is a city that takes a leading role in tackling climate change. Many of you will be aware that the Route to Zero Taskforce was set up to help tackle climate change, and that the city has a target to become net zero carbon by 2030. or as soon thereafter as a just transition allows. We have undertaken a great deal of work since the emergency was declared in 2019. We've undertaken a baseline study. We appointed consultants and thesis to undertake that work for us, and that helps us to understand the current emissions in the city and the interventions that will be needed to achieve the net zero target. For those of you who haven't seen that work, it is available. It was reported to full council in September 2020 and is available on the council's website, and we can share a link to that after the meeting if anyone hasn't seen it. We've had various ongoing meetings of the Climate Task Force. We had a series of what we called sandpits, where we looked in depth at specific issues, for example, housing and transport. And we undertook some comms and engagement work around gathering people's views on climate change and the actions that they were prepared to take. And all of this culminated in the Route to Zero call to action plan, which was endorsed by the City Council on the 12th of January. And again, that's publicly available on the council's website for those who haven't seen it. The report contains short and medium term commitments along with timescales for delivery. And there's a number of Wave 1 projects in there. And these are really the first projects that will start to move us towards our net zero carbon target. The progress of implementing the report will be reviewed annually, and we will take a report to full council in January of each year, setting out the progress and the next steps for the year ahead. So the call to action identifies a number of key priority areas, and they are housing retrofit, energy, transport and connectivity, waste, new build housing, city of nature, and then council strategy and engagement and council behaviour and change. And I'll just provide an overview of those now. So essentially the projects are set out on this slide. I am just going to pick up on some key progress points. So under new build, our future city plan will set out a vision for the future of Birmingham, and it focuses on a green and sustainable city. We've undertaken first stage consultation document, and that's available online, and we can share links after the meeting. But that really starts to embed the net zero carbon thinking in the future development strategy for the city. Transport and connectivity, we're in the process of rolling out EV charging points, so a network of 194 chargers over 7 years, and we're in the very early stages of that now, with the first charging point starting to be installed. We're working with ESB on a longer term charging strategy as well. So the first network of 394 will be fast and rapid chargers, but looking to expand that based on market demand up until 2030. In terms of new build housing, we have a passive house pilot. We have a site identified at Dorbury Fields, and this is Birmingham Municipal Housing Trust, which is the council's own affordable housing provider. And we will have a scheme comprising of 48 homes, and it's on track to receive planning permission, or hopefully in August of this year. And the COVID-19 pandemic has obviously forced us to rethink about how we work. The council has what's termed a new ways of working programme, and this will see the council adopt new patterns of work which will reduce emissions through reduced commuting and reduced business travel. And the City of Nature, based around the Future Parks Accelerator, building upon that, the council is working in collaboration with National Lottery Heritage Fund, National Trust and the Ministry of Housing and Communities and Local Government. The project is across 9 different local authorities, and the Birmingham programme is specifically designed to protect and develop natural resources in urban areas and to make sure quality green space is accessible for everyone now and into the future. And building upon that theme, we have termed one of the actions in the action plan the City of Nature. So that's about looking beyond the Future Parks Accelerator at what we can do to green our urban environment. So a few further highlights. We obviously touched upon our future city plan. We have a staff training module which is being developed on environmental sustainability issues, carbon reduction, and we're hoping that that will be rolled out to all staff as a mandatory training module commencing in the next few months. We also have the Birmingham Transport Plan. That's currently in draft and it's expected to be adopted policy by the end of this year. It will be accompanied by a live delivery plan, which will have more detail on the schemes and specific interventions, funding and carbon impacts. And it will essentially enhance walking and cycling linkages and public transport provision, particularly within the city centre, but also those key routes into the city centre. And it will really start to focus on reducing car use within the city centre. We have ERDF funding secured for an energy saving pilot, again through BMHT, and we have more detail to follow in the new build presentation. And we also have secured funding from the Green Homes Grant local authority scheme for retrofit, and that's a scheme that will deliver around £6 million worth of funding to retrofit existing homes. So in terms of the Wave 1 monitoring, how we're making sure that these projects are delivered, we have monthly reporting taking place on all of the Wave 1 projects, and this captures progress, next steps and risk status. And then we can give extra support to projects that may need assistance to get back on track. We can work with the project owners to try and identify those issues that are slowing the project down or aren't working as they should be. We have an internal working group which is made up of the council officers leading on the different Route to Zero projects within the programme. So that internal working group meets monthly. This gives project leads an opportunity to discuss progress and share insights, and we have a number of spotlight presentations at each of those meetings. It also helps to embed the principle of net zero carbon across the authority. Each of the projects within the portfolio have their own monitoring indicators, and those indicators are picked up on by the Route to Zero monitoring so that we can help to see if those projects are on track and what more we need to do to keep them on track. The collection of carbon reduction data has begun, and this will be fed back to full council in the report in January 2022. In terms of the wider Route to Zero approach then, the diagram in front of you shows where we are today and the path to 2030 and beyond that to 2050. So we have the Wave 1 Route to Zero projects, which are those first key projects to take us on the journey. Beyond that, next year we'll see a further wave of projects come on stream, and that will be Wave 2. Those projects are the projects that will take us to 2030 and hopefully to net zero carbon. Wave 3 then will continue to focus on that work in terms of reducing carbon emissions. We know that in order to get to 2030, in order to get to net zero carbon, initially we will need some offsetting. But I think beyond our achievement of net zero carbon, there is a programme of work around if we are offsetting, whether we can do any more to really drive down our emissions and reduce our reliance on that offsetting. So we will have a programme of continuous evaluation and re-evaluation of the projects to ensure that they're on track and delivering, and that once they're delivered, they are reducing emissions and seeing what more we can do to really drive down those emissions through those projects. And we'll also be in a continuous process of monitoring the external environment and exploring funding options and securing grant funding and commercial funding for our Route to Zero programme. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria, for that presentation and update on the work of the Route to Zero programme. I just want to remind colleagues who are on this call, you can ask us some questions through the live event Q&A section of the meeting. There have been 1 or 2 questions posed on there, and we will try and respond to some of these questions during the course of the meeting, and we will also take some away that we can't respond to. Maria, there's been some questions that we've had in advance of the meeting. Quite a few, over 20 questions were submitted prior to the meeting. Do you want to try and respond to some of those now? And we might also, whilst you respond to them, get some more questions from the participants in the meeting. I know there's some questions that are coming in around the technology, and as I said at the outset, these aren't normal circumstances. Ideally, we would have loved to have had this meeting in the city centre, and also we had over 100 people sign up to the meeting, so it would have been quite difficult to have a Teams meeting with so many attendees with full access, in full Teams access. So we've had to adopt this system, which is called a Teams live meeting, where the presenters and those answering questions will be able to be on screen, and everybody else will be behind the live event Q&A. We're happy to take some learning away from that and look at what may be a better way of doing it in future meetings. So that's partly the reason why we've chosen this mechanism. Maria, can I hand over to you to respond to some of those questions we had prior to the meeting?
Thank you, Councillor Zafar. Yes, I was just going to pick up on 3 questions in particular that came in prior to the meeting. So the first one is, when will substantive action plans for reducing BCC internal carbon emissions and citywide emissions be published, including carbon reduction trajectories against which progress can be measured? And the answer to that question is that we're currently starting to track carbon emissions for projects, and we will provide further updates at Council in January 2022. So essentially, there's a lot of work going on with the project leads around starting to really nail down the amount of carbon that will be saved through each of the projects, and that will go into that reporting. Sorry, I'm just juggling the technology. So in terms of one of the other questions, we've been asked what has happened to the level of carbon dioxide emissions in the city since the climate emergency was adopted in June 2019. Data is backdated 2 years. So in June 2019, we would have been working off 2016 data, and Birmingham CO2 reductions were 39.3% against the 1990 baseline. The most up-to-date data we have currently is from 2019, at which time our reductions were 43.5% against the 1990 baseline. So obviously what we need to do is to continue to monitor our emissions against the 1990 baseline and look for that, the increase in reduction to continue to go up, and to go up at a greater pace. One of the further questions that we've had is, what, if any, briefings on the climate action plan have been issued internally to council staff and externally to subcontractors? So as I've mentioned in the presentation, we have the internal working group and they meet monthly. And that's all the project leads coming together to discuss progress and share insights. And this meeting includes briefings and spotlight presentations on certain projects within the programme. We're also, as I've also mentioned in the presentation, developing a sustainability and climate change module for all staff, which we aim to roll out within the next mandatory learning pack. And lastly, before hopefully we go on to some of the questions that have been asked in this meeting, we were asked how many staff posts were dedicated to the implementation of the climate action plan, how many posts have been created and how many have been filled. So we're in the process of putting together a climate change team. We're currently interviewing for an assistant director to head up the Route to Zero programme, and we hope to be in a position to make an offer in mid-July, and following that the remaining team structure will be finalised and appointments made. So I can just ask Ellie if there's any questions coming in from the chat.
Yeah, Maria, there's been a few. You might like to answer the question. It's from Anonymous, but it says, what do we consider to be our greatest challenges?
I mean, I can start from an office point of view, and then perhaps if Councillor Zaffa wants to add to this one. I think our greatest challenges are really bringing about that change in thinking and behaviour change across the city, and internally as a council, to really drive forward the carbon reduction. In terms of project delivery, I think the city has a substantial stock of existing buildings, not least our own local authority housing stock and the wider housing stock of the city that needs retrofitting. And whilst we are in the process of looking at schemes that could deliver that, it is undoubtedly a big challenge, but also a really big opportunity in terms of employment and skills and moving towards a green economy.
If I can just add to that, I think totally agree with what Maria said. I think for me, within the organisation, there's also need for behaviour and cultural change. I think it's not easy when you've got institutions as big as Birmingham City Council to ensure that everybody within the organisation understands the challenges around climate change, and we're trying our best to embed that new culture within our organisation. I think beyond our organisation, ensuring that we've got the legislative powers to make some of these changes from government, devolved down from government and from regional authorities, and the resources to go alongside it, I think is really, really important. I think part of our challenge is we've set a very bold and brave target of 2030. The Combined Authority has a 2041 date, the government has a 2050 date. So it's trying to lobby regional partners and national government that we need to move a lot faster on this very, very important agenda than some quarters of government and some quarters of regional government are doing. So it's trying to really get that change. And finally, I'll just say to reinforce, we can't do this on our own. Winning the hearts and minds of our communities is going to be absolutely essential. So, utilising some of those excellent activists on this call today and some of the community networks that we've been talking to for some time to go into every single neighbourhood, get people to understand how very simple, basic changes to the way they live their lives can have a positive impact on the environment rather than a negative impact. So it's getting those little changes that will go a long way in helping us as a city and society address those environmental challenges that are really important. Back to you, Maria.
Thank you. I'm just conscious of time. Ellie, have we got time for some more questions?
Yeah, we've got another 5 minutes.
Okay.
There's another one here from Simon from Greener Birmingham, asking, Maria, this is a big system change for Birmingham. What sort of resources are available for you to drive this across the council? And I think we've started to answer that through another question about the team resource. So maybe just need to reiterate that for now.
Yeah, so we have, we're obviously putting together a team, and that team will have a dedicated budget. In terms of the resources that are available, all of the projects within the action plan have their own a resource through their own directorates. So the climate change route to zero budget is essentially about sort of the programme management element, and the schemes that we deliver will be attracting funding from either directorate budgets or external funding sources. So there are funding sources from government that we can tap into, and we're constantly looking to review those funding sources.
Ellie, can I just respond to a question that Karen Craven's
Absolutely.
Really important question, Karen, and your support and your organisation support, the Active Wellbeing Society's support will be essential. I've often said that the meetings that we've been having, whether it's a climate change task force or other such initiatives in the city, do not look like the city. It's very white middle class conversations we've been having, and it's really important that we go into every single neighbourhood, whether it's inner city Birmingham communities or white working class neighbourhoods, and start to have these very important conversations with those particular communities where there are significant challenges, all sorts of challenges in those communities. So we absolutely need to provide the right level of support to them to ensure that we've got a just transition, but we can't provide the support, we can't have expectations of those communities without first engaging with them and talking to them and understanding their needs and trying to explain what we're trying to achieve here. So I think it's really important that we try and have those very, I wouldn't even say neighborhood level, I'll say street level conversations with those communities. So any support that the Active Wellbeing Society or any other organisation working in the city, particularly those hyper-local organisations, can give us will be essential in this. The council on its own can't do this. We're not going to win this battle if it's Birmingham City Council from up here at a very strategic level trying to talk to communities. This has to happen at a very localised level. Do we, I'm going to move us on, but what I'm going to say, during the course of the meeting, we will be trying to pick up and respond to some of these questions, and keep the questions coming. Even if we can't respond to them during the course of the meeting, we will do our best to respond to them later. So let's keep the conversation going. Maria, thank you for your presentation. Do you want to take your slides off, please? Because thank you. Next, we've got Bally Paddock, who's going to give us an update on the work that the Birmingham Municipal Housing Trust are doing in this very important area, particularly around house building. Bally, I'm sure you can hear me okay, we can see you, so over to you. You've got a short presentation. The presentation has been circulated in advance, so short presentation with some headlines, and then an opportunity for some questions for Bally, please.
Okay, can everyone see the presentation?
We can see you, Bally. We can't see a presentation.
Okay.
Have you pressed the screen share button at the top?
I have, yeah.
Okay, it's not coming up as an option. Oh, hang on, here it comes. Give me just a second. Should be up now.
Okay.
Yeah, can see the presentation.
Just need to hit present, Bally. You know, like a full. There you go. That's it.
Thank you. Oh, is that? Can everybody still see that?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's Birmingham Municipal Housing Trust, and it's also known as BMHT, and basically we work with contractors to build both council houses and properties for sale. The three main activities to support climate change, we've got 2 pilot schemes, and we're also updating our build specification. I will go through the pilot schemes in more detail as the presentation goes on. We've got a pilot scheme which includes energy saving technologies. House properties known as Dogbury Fields, and also we're making changes to our build specification for all new build properties to make them more energy efficient. The Gressel Lane scheme is going to have different energy saving technologies. As well as that, we're going to be looking at increasing the insulation so that we save more energy. And if we're increasing insulation and also making the properties more airtight, we need to ensure that the air inside the property is still fresh air. And one way of doing that is by installing what is called a mechanical ventilation heat recovery, also known as MVHR. And just to summarise, that takes air from inside, like bathrooms and kitchens, draws that in, but it also takes air from outside and converts the air from the outside, heats that up and pumps that back into the property and takes out the stale air outside. In addition, the properties in Gressel Lane that we're piloting will include solar panels on the roof. The roof will actually bring in energy, generate energy from the sun. That will also be then stored in a battery. The picture that you can see, just it's an option, one option of how the battery could look. There's many different types. And the battery will then store the energy so that tenants who live in the property will be able to use that free energy both during the day and in the evenings. Other ways of saving energy, and reducing bills are using heat pumps, and they can be air source heat pumps or ground source heat pumps, but they both work in a similar way in that they absorb heat. So the air source heat pumps absorbs heat from outside, brings it in and uses that heat to actually heat up your radiators and your hot water and any underfloor heating. And exactly the same principle applies to the ground source heat pumps. However, the picture shows that there are pipes which are put underneath the ground, and it's these pipes that actually suck in heat from the ground, and that heat then heats up the your water and your radiators. The radiators are not as hot as traditional wet radiator systems. They provide more a constant heat, a comfortable constant heat throughout the property. The Gressel Lane scheme will have 36 properties, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 bedrooms. All will be for council rent. So they're going to include heat pumps, solar panels which are flush to the roof, car charging points, the MVHRs that I talked about earlier. We'll also be using ground floor, underfloor heating, first floor radiators and the battery storage that I mentioned earlier. In addition, we're going to trial on the 4 green properties you can see on the map, wastewater heat recovery. So that's electric charging points, an electric socket that supplies energy to plug in electric vehicles, the solar panels on the roof that converts solar energy into free electrical energy that can be stored in the battery and used by the tenant later. Water heat recycling is the use of heat exchangers to recover energy and reuse heat from drain water, from various activities such as dishwashing, clothes washing and showers. The technology is used to reduce primary energy consumption for water heat. Lane, we have been successful in European Development Fund. Properties are going to be funded by ERDF, and the housing revenue account will match fund those 30. They will also fully fund 6 properties, so that all 36 properties will have some form of those technologies going forward. Gressel Lane has got planning permission and the tender process has started. The target date to be on site is January 2022 with a completion date of 2023. The properties will be allocated using the Birmingham City Council allocations policy, and monitoring and evaluation will be carried out with the new tenant to learn lessons from it. Also, the tenants will be trained in terms of how to live in these properties, because it will be slightly different from a traditional BMHT property. We've mentioned the passive house scheme earlier on, and a passive house scheme it's a voluntary standard for energy efficiency in buildings. It reduces the building ecological footprint. It results in ultra low energy for buildings that require little energy for space heating or cooling. The scheme is in King's Heath and we're currently in the design stages, and the target is to be on site next year with that particular scheme. There are 5 principles for a passive house. They're extremely airtight. They have high performance triple glazed windows. The insulation is super insulation. We use the MVHR, the mechanical ventilation that I mentioned earlier on. And lastly, thermal bridging, that's basically within the junctions of the property, that is to stop warm air from escaping, so keeping it inside and keeping the property more energy efficient. In addition, Birmingham Municipal Housing Trust have developed a building specification which we pass on to contractors, and contractors use that to build our properties for us. The government have announced that by 2025 all new homes will have no gas and will instead be heated by low carbon alternatives. And that's the reasons for trialling the passive house schemes and the technologies in Gressel Lane. Also, we started looking at our build specification and looking at where we can make changes now for 2025. They will be more energy efficient.
I think Bally's frozen on us.
Sure. Next steps will be to implement the 2 pilot schemes and complete the current review of the build specification and implement that this year. Thank you.
Thanks, Bally. So, Ellie, looking at the Q&A section, which of these questions that have come in thus far are for Bally? I know Lisa's question is definitely for Bally. So, Bally, the question from Lisa Trickett is, given the low cost of running zero carbon houses, how are you going to address the risk of right to buy and ensure these are maintained for community good?
At the present moment in time, we can't stop the right to buys, unfortunately. That's legislation and we can't actually stop the right to buy.
So when I referred earlier to legislation helping us or hindering us, I think this is one of the things that we really need to take a closer look at and obviously use our lobbying powers as a local authority to take the challenge to central government. Ellie, are there any other questions there that are specific for Bally's presentation?
This one was from Anonymous. It says, do you think that the BMHT pilot projects go far enough when there's the requirement to act at a large scale and rapidly over the next 9 years? So I presume, they're inferring, our 2030 goal. How do we plan to scale up our pilot activities?
Well, I mean, part of it is to actually implement them, do our monitoring, do our evaluation, learn lessons from them, and then actually roll out what we've learned to other BMHT schemes. In addition to that, we've got the building regulations changes coming in, as I've mentioned, in 2025. We're looking at our build specification now to uplift the energy, so we're actually ready for that. So the pilot schemes, the BMHT specification is all about getting ready to move forward so that we can reduce carbon emissions.
Thanks. So we've got some others. There's one that says, has there been any progress lobbying the government? But I presume that that's intended for you. It's not particularly specific.
So I think we need to provide an update at the next meeting in terms of what the asks are to government. So I will endeavour to bring an update in the near future to one of these meetings.
Yeah, and there is a more specific one here that says, how has the full life cycle cost of the battery systems in the passive house properties been taken into account? I think what they mean by full life cycle cost is perhaps the carbon cost. I assume that is what they mean. Maybe they mean monetary cost as well.
I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. I can come back to you.
Come back.
On that one.
That's fine.
Great. Okay. Thank you. As I said earlier, keep the questions coming in. There will be some we take away and respond to colleagues on, and there will be some that we answer during the course of the meeting. Thank you, Bally, for that presentation and taking those questions. Do you want to take down your slides for us, please? So we've got Nick Grayson next. Nick's going to give us an update on the climate adaptation and some of the work that the City of Nature project's been doing. Nick, I know your presentation's been circulated in advance, but if we can get some quick headlines from your report and then hopefully take some questions too. Can I just ask colleagues, when they're typing a question, if they can just put who it's for, it'll make things a lot easier, so we can ensure that colleagues are answering the questions during the course of the meeting as well as live.
Thank you, Councillor Zafar. Welcome everybody. Can I just clarify, am I sharing my screen or are you loading them separately, Ali?
Yeah, Nick, sorry, can you share it for me, because it won't allow me to do it for some reason.
No worries.
Thank you. Right.
Here we go. So thank you very much and welcome. It's a great event to be able to offer connection under these circumstances, as Councillor Zafar has outlined. I just wanted to talk about something that Maria introduced in her introduction that's labelled the Future Parks Accelerator, currently in the 43 projects that we have in Wave 1. But the ambition is now grown into something called the City of Nature, which will embrace all natural environment programmes and will form a substantive part of our response to climate adaptation. My name's Nick Grayson. I'm the Green City Manager for the city, and I'm also a Senior Research Fellow at the University of Birmingham. I happen to really like this quote because it's talking about how people follow maps, but actually very few people make them. And we're really in this position right now of having to create a map from something that nobody else has a route plan for. In terms of this difference between the two sides of climate change, there's considerable emphasis, rightly so, on the mitigation, which is reducing our emissions and having smart technology in place. But what's equally important is how we adapt to an already changed climate and an already changed natural environment. And this programme that I'm describing is our sort of response to that natural environment and the ecological crisis that's also well spoken about on a global scale, but also impacts us here in Birmingham. The requirement from government to have a 25-year environment plan, which they're signed up to, came from this graph. We were in 2012, we started working with a natural capital committee who were advising government. We were the only city that was working with them. And what they published was this graph to say that business as usual on a use case scale was in danger of getting to a tipping point where nature itself wouldn't be able to recover. And what was needed was that you needed to change the way in which we operate onto this green line, where we restore the natural environment around us, because it makes absolute economic sense, and it's the other half of our climate programme. So our challenge in this Future Parks Accelerator, in the little circle there, is to move Birmingham City Council off the railroad track that is that red line onto the green dotted line, in terms of how can we actually change our business as usual operations into a totally different configuration, and over time build the critical capacity that we're going to need to deliver that change, which is why each of those segments are larger and deeper green, because it's responding to that ratchet principle that's in the Climate Accord published in Paris. So we've had a history in Birmingham of working on this agenda. The Green Living Spaces Plan was published in 2013. It was cited as national best practice, and in fact, on an EU scale, we were working with the EU Cities Adapt. Right now, we're working with our colleagues in planning, and the whole city is trying to pull these threads together around our ambitions for climate and our ambitions for nature. And we're retitling this whole strand of the climate action, City of Nature. Now, the environment plan spoke of a 25-year ambition, and this is our first draft of what that might look like for Birmingham. It's taking account of all our biologically important sites, but it's also recognising the role of all those purple sites, which are our standard parks and open spaces, which starts to address that very question that was asked earlier about how inclusive can this be. And that's the exact direction we're going in, is making this a transition for everyone and bringing nature to everybody's front door, rather than something that you have to take a journey for. Now, in order to do that, you need to work with all parts of the council, and our ambition is to set up this new sort of governance model for nature, where we're working, and we've been piloting for 12 months now, with our employment and skills colleagues around green skills for the future, our housing department about how we can connect people with that and the whole planning process, our health and well-being and public health and social care, and the future of children, and actually working with our Children's Trust in terms of children in care and young people in care in the city. And how can you bring all these agendas together and use the natural environment as part of the delivery mechanism to obtain these outcomes that we seek as a city? What we've identified is there's a few gaps. There's a few critical gaps that we need to bridge to actually get us there. And we've called these frameworks. And environmental justice is one of those. I'll go on to talk about each of those. But obviously, we're all sort of conscious of the fact that we want to live in a healthy city. We really want to have a citizen engagement model, and the finance of how we actually pay for this. It's quite complicated, and it now involves the whole moves towards global green finance. So taking each of those in turn, what we have at the moment, this looks a bit complicated, but how you measure the condition of an area or a city, this is a national process. And what's missing at the moment is what's in that red box. No city at the moment, government isn't asking any city to measure access to green space, the effect of an urban heat island, the future of climate change going to make worse, flood risk, again, not being asked for, and this measure around excess years life lost, which is effectively how the environment you live in compromises your life expectancy. So we've layered those up as an experimental, innovative idea and created a new map for Birmingham, where we've also included our demand for future housing and development, and looking at how we can turn that around so that we're saying there has to be a way in which we can address this environmental divide that we've got in the city, but it's also backed by an economic and a social divide as well. And how can we collectively work on that? And the role of green space and nature in those areas is going to be super important going forward over a 25-year period. The way in which we might fund that, at the moment, we're very good at this sort of micro funding, working with communities, looking at sites, operating at a small scale. But the scale of the challenge is such that we're going to have to be looking at macro programs, major programs. Maria and Councillor Zafar have already recognised the fact that other funding is coming on stream, and that's what we're looking at. We're also looking at setting up a community-based alliance that can work together with the third sectors and be that interface between the council and the communities in terms of how do we reach those groups and those parts of the city we haven't traditionally reached and worked with. And this central issue of capacity building, how can all parts of the council recognise within their work programmes and within their future work programmes how the natural environment forms part of that solution, joining the dots effectively. What we're going to produce is a 25-year vision document that'll go to Cabinet in September and then go out to public consultation, and we'd really like to have your support and comments on that. But essentially there's going to be sort of 5 areas of delivery, looking at this whole issue of a healthy city, a just city, engaged city. We want to have a city that's responsive to community need and engagement. And in terms of climate delivery, this is going to be so important in terms of offering people the opportunity to get involved in their local neighbourhoods, and us support that rather than coming out with a standard, no, I'm sorry, you can't do that, which perhaps is how we've been in the past. And then also looking at this value, this question of value. That's not about putting a price on nature. It's about recognizing that contribution nature makes and absorbing and understanding what's meant by sustainable finance. And then bringing those all together in terms of bringing a green and blue infrastructure and a city that actually improves with time and really responds to the climate and ecological emergencies, but actually gets better and better and better. And that's what we're aiming to do. And in terms of where we've come from and where we're going, here are some of those references that I might have mentioned there, so that you can go away and look at some of those things. In terms of the value that I spoke of, in 2019, we published a report that looked at the value of the current open space network of Birmingham, and it said it's worth over £11 billion if you calculate that over a 25-year term, which is the way in which natural valuations are done. So this is a massive part of our sort of economy and our healthy living, and it has to form a central part of this whole equation of how do we move from the city we have at the moment to a climate secure city through nature-based solutions and responses to the pressures that we're going to face increasingly. And that's going to need this whole idea of it being everybody's agenda and bringing all the sort of people along with you, the whole organization, but also giving opportunity for people to engage in that process and be collaborative about it. So that's what we're setting out to do, a 25-year vision, and we'd really like your engagement, support on that. And as I say, that will be coming out sometime in September, and we could make sure through future meetings that we make sure you get to see and enable your chance to feed into that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. There's a few questions that have come in. There's one in particular from Liam Byrne MP, which asks about developing a Coal Valley Country Park and how we can work on that. I think Simon Needle has started to answer that, but I don't know if you've got anything further to add to that.
I haven't, but that whole of that Coal Valley is currently 2 country parks that are linked by a cycle and walking route. So certainly want to pick that up after the meeting with Liam Byrne and have further discussions on that. Absolutely happy, yeah.
Great. Liam, in terms of your question about putting a bid to the Combined Authority to ask for use of their balance sheet, absolutely. I think we, as I said earlier, we need to look at not just financial resources, but also legislative powers from national and regional government. And I think we need to do a bit more work about these asks as a local authority and a city to our regional and national partners. So I'd love to start this conversation. I think we may be meeting on Friday on other matters, but maybe we can spend a couple of minutes talking about how we can progress with this. Bob, your question around free public transport. I'd love free public transport in Birmingham. I'd take, I'd take their offer up any day of the week. But the Bus Services Act 2017 stops local authorities setting up municipal bus companies. It gives mayors extra powers. We've seen that being utilised in Greater Manchester with the Andy Burnham really utilising those powers and starting the process of getting the buses back into public ownership. Our Mayor Andy Street's taken a different approach, so the best we can do at the moment is the enhanced partnership route. And I think again we need to lobby the Mayor of the West Midlands on looking at how we can make public transport more feasible in the city. What we're certainly doing as a local authority is enhancing on the improving the reliability of the bus service in our city, and particularly looking at how we can introduce bus gates and bus lanes right across our city to improve the journey times on that. And we're also looking at other means. So we've got 20 hydrogen buses arriving soon. We've also got a bid at the moment for another 200 before the Commonwealth Games. That will be a game changer. There is no city in the world that has 200 hydrogen buses. We want Birmingham to be the first and the test bed for hydrogen buses, the national test bed for hydrogen buses, which will open all sorts of areas in terms of, a hydrogen supply line help with creating jobs in the supply chain here in our city too. So there's a lot of work we're doing there. There's a question there about low traffic neighbourhoods. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with the statement that Anonymous has made there. There have been some challenges in Kings Heath, and currently local elected members are working with council officers and myself and the relevant members of Parliament to ensure that we address them, and there has been some substantial improvements in traffic flow. So there's a number of interventions we're putting in to ensure that the Kings Heath low traffic neighbourhood is as successful as it could possibly be. It's very early days on the LTN, and I understand those who are concerned, and we're always going to listen to those who express views on either side of the argument. Is there any other questions? I'm trying to answer some of them, but at the same time, are there any further questions for Nick?
Yeah, there's one from Anna Bright from Sustainability West Midlands for Nick, asking how does this fit with the work of the WMCA on the natural capital strategy for the region, and given the need for connectivity between the nature recovery networks, how are you working with neighbouring local authorities on this?
Yeah, so it's yes to both, Anna. We've produced that map, and it's a draft map because government themselves haven't come forward with the exact standardised methodology of how to create a nature recovery network at the moment. So we're one of the pilot authorities driving this forward. And in order to do that, we've been working right across the West Midlands with the Birmingham Black Country and the Warwickshire Wildlife Trust. And we've been working with WMCA and engaging on their natural capital work. And in fact, the whole thing is being joined together. From a nature point of view, it needs to be joined together. From a natural capital point of view, we need to join it together. And we're wanting to share the methodologies we've been using here in Birmingham with the other authorities around us. So there's no sense of us and them. We're very much working together on this and want to do more in the future. And in terms of the tree planting, I mentioned at the start, I'm also a senior research fellow at the university where we're looking at air quality and looking at the placement of trees and future forests. And again, we're looking at that in a collective sense as to how and where they could best serve all these purposes in relation to health and well-being, air quality, and nature recovery. So good question, Anna, and happy to follow that up with you outside of this meeting if you wish.
And there's just one more I'm going to do due to time constraints for Nick, but I think that I know kind of the answer already, but it's from Anonymous saying that we need to speak of the massive health benefits of improving our environment and of the consequent massive reduction of resource pressure on the NHS and other health support services. And, you know, it will lead to improvements in mental health, and we need to recognise that and speak about it more. But I'm sure that you'll agree with that, Nick.
100%, and in fact we've just had some calls this afternoon where we're talking to the health economists at the university to see if they can help us do some calculations that will support what we're proposing here from the health outcomes point of view, and how we can draw those two threads together, because health sits right at the centre of what we're trying to achieve here. Whoever submitted that, 100% in favour of that recommendation and comment, and we are following it through. Yeah, thanks.
Great, thank you. That was a really helpful session, and questions keep flowing in, which is brilliant. So we're getting a good level of engagement. Nick, thank you so much for the update. No doubt we'll see you again with further updates. Moving across to someone who's been incredibly busy the last few weeks, the head of the Clean Air Zone at Birmingham City Council, Steve Arnold, who's going to give us an update on the Brum Breeds campaign. A presentation again has been circulated in advance, so some headlines and hopefully some questions.
Okay, I'll share my presentation. Hopefully everybody can see that.
Yep.
Let's just get that to presentation mode. Okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so thank you very much for the opportunity to present this afternoon. Birmingham's Clean Air Zone went live on the 1st of June, and we're already starting to look through a lot of the data that we've been capturing since the system's been live, and it's been interesting actually just retesting some of the assumptions and some of the original modelling that went into the full business case for the Clean Air Zone. But this afternoon, all I wanted to do really was just remind people of why we're introducing the Clean Air Zone. The type of clean air zone that we're introducing, that's important to remember, but also note that Birmingham is not the only city introducing a clean air zone as a way of addressing an air quality challenge. We're one of several cities that are introducing clean air zone. It's also worth noting that the concept of a clean air zone or something similar to address air quality is a concept that's been rolled out across Europe and other cities around the world. So we're not alone in that. What I'll also cover off is how we're progressing in terms of ensuring that key groups of people are supported through this transition. It was absolutely fundamental to the administration of the organisation and the organisation in building up the business case here that we supported people through this transition, and we've absolutely tried to hold to that principle of being fair and reasonable in the introduction of this scheme, recognising that it can be challenging. And then finally, what I'll do is just talk about how the Clean Air Zone sits within a much broader set of strategies, really. One of those is obviously the Route to Zero, but there's also the draft transport plan, which has been out for consultation, is due to come back to Cabinet in the not too distant future. The Clean Air Zone, through some of the behaviour changes that we expect to see, will absolutely help to drive some of those changes. So poor air quality remains the single biggest environmental risk to public health. It blights the lives of thousands of people in Birmingham and across the country every single day. There is very, very strong evidence that demonstrates that poor air quality is linked to worsening the impact of chronic health disease. It's been linked to increased incidence of heart disease and a number of other illnesses as well. One of the really startling things that we've pulled out is that children in high pollution areas are 4 times more likely to have reduced lung function, and poor air quality disproportionately impacts the young, the older, and people living in deprivation. So there absolutely is a need to do something about this. And for Birmingham in particular, the single biggest air quality challenge that we have is nitrogen dioxide. It's been identified as an issue in Birmingham for some time, and we've done that. And we monitor that through the annual status reports, where all the data is published on an annualized basis. But 80% of roadside nitrogen dioxide comes from road transport, and in Birmingham, 46% of that roadside NOx is from diesel cars. So the Clean Air Zone enables us to tackle the source of the problem, and importantly, in line with the ministerial direction that we're working to do so in the shortest possible time. And it's really, really important that we cannot stress that enough. That is part of the rationale for the introduction of the Clean Air Zone. So, as I said in the introduction, Birmingham's Clean Air Zone became operational on the 1st of June. We've introduced a Type D Clean Air Zone that covers all types of vehicles, and it's an area that is in operation within the A4540 middleway. Daily charges apply 24 hours a day from midnight to midnight, and that's in line with all the other clean air zones that are being introduced. It's also in line with London's ULEZ. The charging is in 2 steps: cars, taxis and vans at £8, HGVs, coaches and buses at £50. The pricing is actually something that government provides guidance on. So there's a range that clean air zone cities are expected to put their pricing at, but through modelling, the pricing is for the daily fee is expected to encourage behaviour change, to do so in the shortest possible time. But we also put the pricing out through the consultation, and we've come in at the lower end of the pricing range. Other cities introducing clean air zones have put their pricing, tended to put their pricing at a high level. However, the modelling we did suggested that this pricing would help us to enable change in the shortest possible time. as I said earlier, we're not the only city introducing a clean air zone. Bath introduced a clean air zone on the 15th of March earlier this year. York introduced a non-charging clean air zone at the beginning of 2021. Portsmouth are due to introduce a clean air zone of type B later on this year, and Bristol will be the next city to introduce a type D. You may also have seen that Greater Manchester published its plans for its clean air zone, which is now scheduled to go live on the 30th of May. That was earlier in the week. That'll be a type C, and that's covering the whole of Greater Manchester, not just the centre of Manchester itself. They believe that that's the best way to approach this, but other cities are introducing different types of schemes or similar schemes. London's ULEZ, due for expansion in October, and Oxford are introducing a zero emission zone. So we're not alone in this. One of the things that we do tend to get asked a lot is why are you charging me to drive my car into Birmingham, but Bath isn't, and that is down to the fact that they've got a type C clean air zone, which doesn't include cars. Ours does, because that's the type of problem that we've got. Each of the clean air zones are there to tackle a local challenge rather than being absolutely the same across the country. Ensuring that we have the right kind of support in place to help the transition has been absolutely critical to us. What this slide does is just gives a snapshot of where we're at on the 10th of June in terms of the volume of exemptions that were in place. On the 10th of June, we had around about 5,700 exemptions. 58% of those were for low-income workers, 32% were for residents. Since the 10th of June, we continue to processing applications. We get them in on a daily basis, and we will continue to do so while these exemptions are in place. And we're now up to just over 6,300 exemptions. We believe that's really important to help, as I said, to help people through the transition. The map that you can see there is a heat map, and just we've been using that throughout this process to ensure that these exemptions are going to the right, are going to people living within the clean air zone. That's been one priority, but also to ensure they're going to the parts of the city where we've got the greatest densities of population, and this map clearly aligns to that. What the next map shows is we've done a similar piece of work with the worker exemptions. We've plotted out where those where the applications were coming from for the workers. This was done very early on in the process. We've yet to do something with the latest batch of data, but what you can clearly see in this map is we've got a cluster of people applying from the to the west of the city, and that's in line with the commuter flows that were modelled very early on for the full business case. And then this map actually shows where we're getting clusters of applications, and these are aligning to areas of the city where we've got greater concentrations of deprivation. So the key thing here is that we're at these exemptions are going to the right people and supporting people through the transition. In addition to the exemptions from the daily fees, we're also at £35 million worth of funding to support upgrade and replacement schemes. There's £10 million for the scrappage scheme and mobility credits, £10 million for the SMEs in the West Midlands for HGVs and coaches, and £15 million for Birmingham licensed Hackney carriage and private hire drivers. The next few slides really just what I just wanted to focus on really was some of the changes that we've already seen within the taxi community. These two slides show the level of compliance in the slide on, in the graph on the left. This shows the level of compliance within the private hire fleet. Private hire vehicles account for around about 75% of all the vehicles in the Birmingham licensed fleet. And we've seen compliance since 2018 go from around about 42% through to May 2021 at 81%. So a really positive change there. For Hackney carriages, the level of compliance has actually doubled. It was 12% back in 2018, but it is now doubled to 25%. But as you can see, there is still a big gap between the level of compliance that we would like to see in that fleet. We think there are a number of other things that are impacting and perhaps are holding people back from upgrading, one of which is the availability of vehicles. There's a different sort of dynamic within the fleet, so we're doing a lot more with some of the bigger operators to help encourage that change. But interestingly, with the Hackney carriage scheme, what we have seen is that the age profile of the vehicles in those fleet has actually got a lot younger. So the graph at the bottom shows the age profile for vehicles back in 2018. As you can see from this, in 2018, there were a handful of vehicles that were 25 years old. That's the oldest vehicle now was in 2020 was 21 years old, and we expect that to improve over time as well. That's not just down to the CAS, that's also down to the policy within the taxi licensing committee that encourages people to get into newer vehicles. But all of these things together, working in combination, are helping to improve that fleet. So the final couple of slides I just wanted to cover off really are about how the clean air zone sits within, is seen as an enabler for a couple of very, very big and important strategies for the city. The first is Birmingham's draft transport plan. And there's 4 big moves really that are embedded into this plan. Reallocation of road space, transforming the city centre, prioritising active travel and managing demand. But the really, really key principle in that is it's shifting mobility to focus very much on the movement of people rather than cars. It's important to remember that Birmingham was recreated back in the 50s and 60s to service the vehicle. It was a demonstration of where the wealth was coming from the various heavy industries that were involved in that, but also the ownership of motor vehicles was seen as a demonstration of prosperity. But that's obviously a very, very finite that there are only so many roads that you can build, and we need to do something different. So everything that we're doing in here is about encouraging that behaviour change, and again the clean air zone is very much seen as an enabler of that change. And as I said before, the clean air zone is absolutely part of the Route to Zero scheme. In the original full business case, there was an estimated carbon saving allocated to the clean air zone, and over the original projected business plan, which was 10 years for the clean air zone, the potential saving in terms of carbon was somewhere in the region of 790,000 tonnes over 10 years. That's an average of 79,000 tonnes of CO2 per year. Now that we're starting to get real data, we are working within the monitoring and evaluation program to better understand what that carbon saving might be. The other important enabling element of the Clean Air Zone program is that all of the income, all of the revenue that's generated has to be reinvested into transport related schemes and strategies. The cabinet members already talked about the 20 hydrogen buses that the scheme is helping to support. There's also funding that's been provided to the expansion of the city's fast and rapid electric vehicle charging network, and we're also looking at a rent to buy scheme where we were looking at of up to 50 electric Hackney carriages being purchased to encourage the adoption of this ultra low emission technology within the taxi fleet. So that was a quick run through the clean air zone in terms of where we're up to. Are there any questions?
There's one or two. Steve. Okay, start with Jules Todd. What is being done to identify, remove / repair the small number of high mileage diesel smokers which generate a large percentage of particulates? Leeds City Council have a reporter smoker scheme.
Oh yes, no, I am aware of that. Yeah, so I mean, it's a really interesting question. I mean, we would see that really as sitting probably within the broader air quality action plan, where we're looking at activity across the whole of the city. It's also important to note as well that the clean air zone framework that all the cities that are introducing clean air zones are working to also includes a number of other measures that local authorities are encouraged to investigate, such as no idling schemes, expanding on those, supporting those. Greater monitoring around schools and activities to build engagement and awareness, the introduction of additional measures around wood burning stoves, and we're already doing a number of these things, but it's certainly an area that we're keen to investigate as part of this program.
Another question here from Isaac: why is a congestion charge, which has a far bigger impact on behaviour change, not being introduced?
I thought this was going to be a question, why are you introducing a congestion charge? So that's a very interesting question. The way I would try and respond to that is that the congestion charge in London operates in a very specific way. It is designed to tackle congestion. It only operates between 7 in the morning and 10 at night. I mean, it does operate every single day, but it is designed to tackle congestion. That's the way the pricing is done. That's the way the whole scheme is created. The issue we're trying to address is the levels of nitrogen dioxide that are above the legal limit. We have a ministerial direction in place that says we need to take action, and we need to do so in the shortest possible time. The Clean Air Zone provides us with a tool, one of the tools to help us to do that. The full business case that we brought forward included a Type D Clean Air Zone, but there are a number of other additional measures that we included because that's the scale of the challenge we have, and that's why we've gone down the route of doing that, because it's an operation 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year, and it is targeting non-compliant vehicles.
Great. Jules Todd has a question. Midnight to midnight discriminates against people often low-waged who work late at night. Why not shift the charging window to say 44?
That's another interesting question. I think there's a couple of things within that. I think the first thing is that midnight to midnight provides consistency between this scheme and all the other clean air zones that are being introduced. It's also consistent with London's ULEZ. I think any changes as they've been described potentially discriminate against other people. I think that's something to be mindful of. And the other thing to note as well is that if you are working a shift pattern over a period of number of days, you are not necessarily having to pay twice. You are paying only once for each of those days that you are entering into the clean air zone. And there are other there's exemptions in place for low-income workers who are working in the clean air zone, so they get an exemption for 12 months, for up to 12 months. And there is the scrappage and mobility scheme that's in place to support workers on low incomes within the clean air zone. So as a package, we think we've got enough support in there, but again, the cabinet member's been absolutely clear about that we will continue to monitor this. We're not just introducing this and walking away, we are monitoring the impact of this, and if there are additional measures that we need to introduce to help this transition, he's absolutely challenged us to keep an eye on that and bring forward additional mitigations if they're required.
Right. Roxy Gale says Type D has been referred to. How would anyone understand what this letter means on your road sign? So I think that's a really good point.
It is a really good question, and it's a difficult one to answer. I think part of the challenge here is about, you know, and I kind of touched on this earlier, really. We you know, one of the questions, and the reason I raised the question about, well, you know, why is my car exempt in Bath but not here? And that is because of the different types of clean air zone. I think, you know, the clean air zones are a government policy. They set the framework, they set the guidance for the delivery of these things, and that is what the local authorities are working to. Similarly, they also provide the funding to deliver these schemes. I know it would be helpful if there was perhaps more awareness around the different types of categories at a national level to help drivers, especially drivers moving between areas, and to help the introduction of them at a local level. But that's something that we can continue to ask and request from government.
Steve, there's another question here from Anonymous. What has been the impact on roads outside the CAS as a result of its implementation?
It's very early days, I think it would be fair to say. What we have seen at a very high level, and I would absolutely put a very, very heavy health warning on some of these headlines, but what we've seen since the 1st of June is that the volume of vehicles on a daily basis is more or less consistent travelling through the clean air zone. What we have seen between the first 2 weeks versus the last week and a half is that the percentage of non-compliant vehicles has actually reduced. So in the first 2 weeks, there was a higher level of non-compliant vehicles. In the last week and a half, that percentage has reduced. So there's a sense that some sort of behaviour change is going on there. At the same time, the traffic, the volume of traffic on the ring road in particular, we've seen a very, very marginal increase, less than 5%, less than 4%. But again, it's really, really too early to say as to whether or not any of those behaviour changes are embedded, any of those changes to diversions of traffic. But we are absolutely committed to publishing the data. So at the end of June or early July, we will publish a fact sheet with the stats from the clean air zone, in very much using the template set by TfL with its ULEZ, and we will continue to publish those on a monthly basis. We're also going to be publishing a baseline report around air quality and traffic volumes, so that's our benchmark to measure progress going forward, and we will continue to publish data, and we want to make that data available as in an open source format as well.
I would just endorse what Steve said about just holding fire before we start publishing any of that information. It's very early days. The whole patterns around people's journeys. 2 weeks ago was half term. Last week the weathers weren't so good. All these have played a role in some of the and how people are moving about in the city. So as Steve said, we'll be publishing some data. Ben from the Musicians Union, whilst we've been on this call, I've had some emails from the business improvement districts in the city centre literally asking me the same question. I'd encourage you to write to the government, and particularly the two government ministers who've been overseeing this, Rebecca Powell and Rachel McLean. If the government, could look at their back office systems facilitating the 24-hour period rather than 12 to 12, we would look at that. Marie Hill. So Marie, in terms of some of the low income, your suggestion that this has had an impact on those on lower incomes, that's partly, or that's the reason why the 12-month exemption and the scrappage scheme is only open to those who work in the clean air zone area and earn less than £30,000, because we wanted to prioritise those on lower incomes than those who can absolutely afford to change their vehicles. Anna Bright, Sustainability West Midlands. Can the council was establishing a network of clean air champions in local communities to support engagement. Has this been successful? Could their role be extended to net zero champions? Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question. Have they been successful? Yes, I think they have. I think they have. It's more of a qualitative success. It's very difficult to put a quantitative figure on it. But the whole role of engagement at a community level was really important to us. And what we were trying to do through that scheme, through trying that really, was about enabling people to have conversations around the air quality challenge. We weren't asking them to be champions for the clean air zone. What we were doing was trying to recruit people so that they could help explain what poor air quality is, the sources of it, and some of the ways that people can make a difference. And it's exactly the same sort of principle that we built into the Clean Air Day installation that's been in place at New Street over the last week as well, is that the pollution that you get from vehicle exhaust is part of the problem. It's not the only air pollution problem we've got, and all of us can actually play a role in improving it.
Thanks. There's a couple of questions from Simon and Isaac about whether the clean air zone will be expanded. To be absolutely clear, we've introduced the clean air zone to get compliant in the shortest possible time, as instructed by government. There's no conversations at any level to look at any future projects beyond what we've just introduced. So I just want to make that absolutely clear. How do you respond to the assertion that the clean air zone pushes the pollution to more deprived areas that become rat runs? When we release the information about some of the journeys that people are making across the city later this month, I think that we will help answer that. So rather than me and Steve guessing, you'll see some of the data that we start to publish, and we want to absolutely be open and transparent with the data. Whatever it shows, positive, negative, challenging, we will put that out in the public domain and let the people of the city decide. Are there any schemes encouraging park and ride on the boundaries of the CAS into the city? We want to, one of my aims is to, wherever we introduce a bus rapid transit route, we put a park and ride alongside it. So the first one we're introducing on the A34, we are hopefully pushing ahead with a park and ride park and ride park just outside our boundary into Warsaw on the A34. There was a question I came across where it said people love cars in Birmingham and hate buses. I just want to respond to that. I know people in Birmingham love cars. There's no two ways about that. And we absolutely want to reset the relationship between car and people in our city. There will always be a role for car, but we want to sort of deprioritize car in the pecking order. But when people say that we hate buses, that's not actually true. We were pre-COVID bucking the national trend. We were getting more people onto bus journeys, and we were going in the opposite direction to everywhere else. Obviously, with the pandemic hitting and the government's instructions about social distancing on buses and making buses available to those that absolutely need it, there's clearly been a hit in the bus industry. But as part of our sort of recovery post-COVID, we want to ensure that buses start to get that level of priority back again, and we are absolutely committed as a local authority to give more space to buses on our roads. Some of you might have seen the Moore Street bus lane, Sheepcote bus gate, the Moore Street bus gate. There'll be many other similar projects. We're going to be brave and bold and give buses as much space as they need in our city's highway infrastructure to ensure they're getting through our city as efficiently and as reliable as possible. I wish we could, there's questions about free public transport. Just to repeat, I welcome that all day long. Simply don't have the powers or the resources to make that happen. If Grant Shapps and Boris Johnson want to make that happen, we'll be more than happy to accept those powers and try to roll that out. But I can't see that happening anytime in the near future. Steve, that's been really helpful. There's many other questions. Kaz has certainly got people interested and asking questions. We will try and pick up some of these offline and respond to those colleagues that we can't answer online. But Steve, thank you for your presentation, and thank you for all the work you and your team are doing on the implementation of the Clean Air Zone.
Thank you.
Thanks. So the final presentation is from Dominic O'Brien, who will be presenting an item on Birmingham Net Zero, which is a company supporting businesses with their net zero transition. The presentation has been circulated in advance. We're going to get a presentation from Dominic. Unfortunately, there may not be no time for questions, but we can certainly pick these up offline and pass them to Dominic to respond back to colleagues. Dominic, over to you.
Perfect, thanks, Councillor. Or do I have the opportunity to share the screen? It's greyed out. Could somebody give me access to share, please?
You should have access to share. Do you not?
No, it says only meeting organisers and presenters can share on mine, unfortunately.
Okay. You are a presenter, so I have no idea why that's happened.
All right. If I make you into a presenter, now you're a presenter, you can.
Right, I've got it. Perfect. Thanks for that. Right. Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Something is coming up.
Hopefully you should see something.
I'm not seeing anything.
It says that you're sharing, but it says that you're not sharing anything for me.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's try again. Apologies.
It's
the
all
joy,
right.
the joy of tech.
No,
right. Let's go again. Share content.
Not
right,
I can attempt, but I don't think I can do it as a producer.
See that, guys?
No, it's not working. Okay, let me try. Did that work? No, it hasn't worked.
I've just shared again.
I don't think I can do it as a producer because my screen is the producing screen. So I'm thinking perhaps because you're external, Dominic, that's why it won't allow you to share.
I'm happy to go off the cuff and
I also can't share. I would need a colleague who also has the PowerPoint to share it. I don't know if Maria's still on the line and can share it for me. Or Councillor Zaffa, or anyone who's...
Yeah, if you send me the presentation, I'll share it.
Can I email you? I'll email it you now, because I made some changes yesterday, so I'll just send it to you now if that's okay.
Yeah.
I'll whistle stop through it if we're stuck for time.
We're actually doing totally fine for time. Sorry, I was told I was able to share everything, and then when we got here, found out I couldn't share anything at all, and that's just, I was given the wrong advice from IT. Yeah, if you send me it, I'll send it on.
Perfect. I'm just sent it over to you now, Ellie.
Thanks.
Dominic, do you want to kick off with something off the cuff whilst we presentation, please?
Just sending it over. Yes, of course. I'll get you guys going right. Birmingham, Ellie.
Yeah, it hasn't come yet.
I'll crack on. So, sorry about that, everyone. Hi, my name's Dominic O'Brien. I'm the managing director and founder of Birmingham Net Zero and Experience. I'm guessing one of the guys will get up the slides in a second, but I've been invited to talk to you today about our pledge, which we made recently to help 2,000 businesses get on the road to net zero over the next 5 years. I'm a very proud Brummie, and I feel the responsibility can I think private companies need to collaboratively rather get and help each other, get on. Hopefully you can see me now as well. So yeah, what I want to talk to you about is how we approach this with businesses in the West Midlands and also around the UK, but I'd like to talk to you about how we approach it with them, talking through why we do it and how we do it in terms of all things net zero. So I'm guessing everybody on the call is aware, hence the conversation, that in 2019 Parliament obviously passed legislation that the UK will be net zero emissions by 2050, and recently they updated their legislation, if you like, to reduce carbon to 78% by 2035. And obviously our beautiful city Birmingham has made commitments to reduce it by 2030, which is just 9 years away, and that's not very long at all in terms of business and becoming net zero. Firstly, I'd like to talk to you about some of the biggest reasons why businesses need to embrace, if you like, net zero and start getting on the road to net zero because of the challenges that they're getting, and especially businesses that are in supply chains, that we're seeing that they're getting overwhelming pressure from big corporates at the top of the supply chain, pushing down pressure in terms of what are you doing in terms of net zero. And we've seen two of our biggest customers. One's a poultry farmer, and one works in the automotive industry, and both of those have more or less had ultimatums by the head of their supply chain that if they don't get on the road to net zero, present a plan by 2025, they'll be out of the supply chain. And you're talking about West Midlands businesses that have multi-million-pound contracts with some of these supply chains, and will be taken away from them if they can't show a credible plan. So that's a big reason, to push businesses that are in supply chains to start looking at this. We also ultimately believe that if businesses don't start looking at this now, the longer they'll leave it, the more costs they're going to have to either find themselves as a business to implement solutions, or the more capex that they're going to have to try and go to the market to get that. And I think the issue with that you'll see banks are starting to change their view on sustainability in the future in lending criteria, and their scope to start looking at carbon footprints and sustainable business models before investments given within businesses. So yeah, the future in terms of investment is looking very slim for unsustainable businesses. Another few reasons why it's important to start a net, because of the demand for renewable energy. So I'm sure most of you know that there's not enough renewable energy in the UK to meet demand what's needed. So we need to be more clever in terms of what we're doing with our energy on site and look at solutions where we can generate energy ourselves. And I think the final point on the why is, you know, a lot of businesses are still relatively unknown in terms of net zero. A lot of businesses that we speak to, financial directors, you know, historically have been more important to the bottom line, rightly so. You know, businesses need to make money to sustain, but now because of buying decisions which are changing across the UK, they're having to look at more sustainable stroke net zero models to keep their supply chain as well. I'm not sure if the slide's up yet, because I'd like to show you what we deem as a blueprint to help businesses. I mean,
yeah, the slides are up, Dominic.
Oh, fantastic. Let me just see where we are.
So slide, our strategy and the road to net zero.
Yeah, so if you could move on to our strategy and the road to net zero. You just said that. So yeah, moving on to that. I think when we've I guess spoke to businesses about the why in terms of net zero for all of the reasons I've just discussed and many more, the next step is what it look like in terms of a timeline. And I think the overriding message that I'd give to everybody is businesses cannot create a net zero plan unless they understand their carbon footprint firstly. So I would urge any businesses to look at their carbon footprint, do some research in terms of what your footprint is as a business, because that will give you a line in the sand, if you like, in terms of you know, the direction you need to go in terms of reducing your footprint. You'll see here part of our net zero strategy. I mentioned at the start of the call that any given business can help one business complete a net zero journey. It's a collaborative approach that needs to happen here. So we've teamed up with many different businesses like E.ON, Low Carbon SMEs, Aston Business School, Carbon Expert, True Horizon Sustainability Strategies. Boy, that's a mouthful, apologies. To help businesses of different process, different people, in terms of people and processes rather, because one different technologies, so having a plethora of businesses that can help in those areas is key. So once you have your carbon footprint analysis, that's when you can certain technology, things like solar, or there might be technologies to help you manage your energy. You might need a funding solution, pumps, etc. Net zero projects and efficiencies. I mean, battery storage is something that we work quite a lot with some of our customers, as well as small scale from LED lighting. Supply contracts are just a bolt on to a wider net zero strategy, if you like. Our proposition's underpinned quite excitedly with an accreditation from our partners, Future Net Zero. Or receiver accreditation, which has helped some of our businesses stay within supply chains, more importantly. If you could please move on to the next slide, that will just give you an idea of what a dashboard should look like. So it will a dashboard, well, a good carbon dashboard, there's many out there, should show you exactly what your footprint is each month and the tons that it's putting into the atmosphere and where it's coming from. Having that data and visibility is absolutely vital in terms of starting a net zero plan. And finally, businesses to show them a step staged approach, because net zero is still very new to businesses, and you have to approach this with baby steps at the start just to show them an here that we take on our to show them the strategy, if you like, of moving forward to net zero. So yeah, I think as I say, my name's Dominic O'Brien. You can find me on LinkedIn or my emails at the end of the slide, which Ellie can forward out if that's okay at the end of this.
Thank you, Dominic. I will ask Ellie to forward the slides. We were having some technical issues because your internet connections are not the best, Dominic, so I think you were cutting in and out quite a bit during your presentation, but nevertheless, we will send out the slides to colleagues so they can have a look at it and pass it across their networks and also get it across to yourselves. And if there are any questions, you can pose them directly to Dominic. Thank you for that, Dominic. So colleagues, this has been a really interesting meeting. We've had quite a lot of engagement. We had over 20 questions in advance. There's been 74 plus 14, so nearly 90 questions during the course of this meeting. I'm really keen to hear from you on how you think this meeting's been, particularly the format of it, and hopefully the next time we meet, which is in October, we should be able to meet in hybrid, obviously pending government guidelines and the challenges that COVID creates. So, but I'm really keen to hear from you. Let us know how you think today's meeting went. And we'll obviously, you know, a lot of you will be engaged in different processes and different projects relating to our wider work on the Climate Assembly and the overall Route to Zero programme. And I want to say a big thank you to each and every one of you. When the names were coming up, the questions, there was a lot of you I know are involved in all sorts of ways. And if you do have any ideas, any suggestions, please drop me a line, please drop Maria or Ellie or any of the team a line. We're always really keen to hear. And just to go back to what was said at the start, we need to work together to win the hearts and minds of our citizens, to make those changes, particularly in some of our more deprived communities. Just transition needs to be at the very heart of everything that we do as part of our Route to Zero work, and without that we're not going to succeed. So together I'm pretty sure we can take on the environmental challenges that exist within our city and country and society as a whole, but it's going to be a long, hard slog between all of us coming together. Thank you again, and can I say a particular thank you to all the presenters, and Ellie, Amit and Maria in particular, and Rose, who've helped pull today's meeting together. It's been quite challenging, but I've been, you know, I think the meeting's gone relatively well. I was quite nervous beforehand, but please send us your comments on how you think it's gone. Hopefully I should see you over the summer in all sorts of ways, but if I don't, I'll definitely, God willing, see you in the October Climate Assembly. Take care and have a good evening.